Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be talking about specifically the moon in Gemini and moon in the third house. So if you have either of those placements, this video is for you, or if you know some of those placements, this video is for you. This is part of my Gemini series that I'm doing, so I'm going to be doing every single planet in Gemini and in the third house, so feel free to follow along with that. I've also done Taurus and Aries, obviously, and so there's a lot of development as we're going through this, and there's so many different things we're going to be talking about. So obviously, hello, my name is Brandon. I do astrology here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all the things, and I'm here to just really talk about specifically what it means to have the moon in Gemini and the moon in the third house. So I'm going to do a little bit of a little intro of specifically what the moon means in astrology. And then after that, I'm going to talk specifically about the moon in Gemini and the moon in the third house. There are going to be timestamps below, so you can kind of click to whatever refers to you, because I know with YouTube, and especially with Gemini placements, you guys are very quick on the information. So feel free to look down below and to see and skip to what you need to skip to, depending upon what you got going on. So with that being said, I'm going to go right into it, and I'll see in the next part we're going to talk about specifically what it means with the moon in astrology and just the moon in general, right? Okay, so the moon in astrology and the moon in general, it's very different, more sensitive part of the chart. So wherever the moon is at within the chart, is going to have a lot of specific feelings that are associated with it. So when the moon, because it waxes and wanes and it changes so rapidly, it has a lot to do with our own internal emotional guidance and our emotional kind of ability to keep ourselves stable. So depending upon where the moon is at in your chart and how the moon is aspected as well, you'll see that there's different parts of your specific way of getting your emotional needs met. So listening to your feelings, knowing how to listen to your feelings, knowing your moon sign is extremely important, because it will allow you to communicate and understand more specifically about how you kind of emotionally react, emotionally respond, how you feel safety, feel security, how you would like to do those things. And so the moon has a lot of themes around that sort of process of emotional regulation and safety and security. But the thing about the moon as well is it does have this quality, and this is more referring to the house system, or rather the house placement. But wherever the moon sits, it's going to kind of change by day the themes of that house. And so depending upon the moon's sign and house placement, it's going to say, okay, I need these, I emotionally really want these things to make me feel secure. But then as the moon waxes and wanes in that specific area of the house, it's going to make it kind of like an up and down sort of thing. Things aren't really going to stay stable all the time. And so the moon specifically has probably the quickest and therefore the most emotionally, instability focused and stability focused in that same way, kind of energy around it. So it's really important to know your moon sign, and also just kind of know where it's at in the house. And obviously, if you have your moon in the third house, this video is for you. If you have your moon in Gemini, this video is also for you. If you happen to have both, that's pretty cool. So this video is very much for you. And also, of course, as I go through this series, you're going to see a lot more different placements that are going to be in different houses and different signs and stuff. So feel free to follow along. I am obviously just on Gemini now, so there's going to be a lot more that I'm going to be doing. And I'm just really excited to be doing this series here. So with that being said, we're going to move into the next part, which is just specifically the moon in Gemini. Okay, so the moon in Gemini, you guys have such an interesting way of understand emotions and communicating. So whenever the moon is placed in another air sign, and I say another air sign because I'm an air sign individual myself, so I have a airy quality to the way that I go through my feelings. So it's going to be a different yet similar approach, because it's the same element being air. So when the moon is in an air sign, it's going to approach the emotions from obviously a mental, logical, talk it out kind of way. So moon in Gemini, they have a very emotionally changeable kind of thing, because Gemini is a very mutable, it's a very adaptable sort of sign, and the moon is also quite adaptable, and it kind of goes with the waves, right? So the moon in Gemini can have quite a little bit of a emotional kind of up and down, and then trying to find the way to communicate specifically what they're feeling. There can be that. Sometimes I see that quite often, where there's a lot of information that they're processing, and a lot of emotional information they're also processing, and they need to have that constant kind of like conversation about what it is they're processing, and kind of really talk those things out. In that same vein, Moon and Gemini people, you guys can be amazing therapists and amazing like supportists, if that's a word. But point is there's a lot of mental agility that you guys have in that emotional field. And also too, on the same vein, kind of flipping that conversation around, there's a lot of emotional maturity you have in the mental field, meaning that you're able to kind of feel your feelings and then kind of find the right word for them, find the right way to communicate them. And then in the same way, when someone is saying words and saying these things, you're able to kind of find a way to navigate the feelings mentally, and put words to what that person is feeling, what you're feeling, and also be able to kind of understand the range of emotion that you or another person is feeling around you, and find the way to kind of come to that, not really that middle ground, but more of that kind of mutual understanding of shared opinion of, okay, you did this thing, this hurt my feelings, let's talk about it, right? You see that a lot with mutable moons in specific, where there's this quality of like wanting to speak on something, and wanting it to kind of also be a yes and, or like an and or kind of thing, kind of like on both sides, because all of the mutable signs have this dual quality to them, and so they're kind of pulled in both directions quite often when you see the moon in any mutable sign. But I think in Gemini it's a little bit more exaggerated. You're gonna see a lot more of the kind of push and pull in how they communicate about feelings, and they're going to be kind of not really back and forth, but they're going to want to explore all of these options over here, and then also all of these options over here when it comes to either your feelings, how your feelings are interacting with them, how they're making you feel, how you're making them feel, those sorts of things. You can see that a lot. But the Moon Gemini, because it is an air sign, and it kind of needs to expel that sort of emotional buildup, you can see quite often with the Moon Gemini that there's just a lot of talking ability, and a really good ability as well to just know how to communicate with the public too, because the moon also rules the public and the public perception, and also how we interact with the public. So depending upon where the moon in Gemini is at, it's going to have a very salesy, potentially. Moon Geminis are really good for sales. Gemini is very salesy, mercurial. Yeah, that's a very Gemini field. And the moon in Gemini can have a really good, specifically career in sales, because the moon rules the public, and in Gemini they're able to kind of play that merchant, play that kind of like that role of that communicator. In the same way too, Gemini, if negatively aspected, you can see that there could be a manipulative quality, because Geminis are really, really adaptable, almost to a degree that is quicker than the average person. And because of that, they can kind of take something and twist it. Because the thing is about Mercury and Neptune kind of, but Neptune doesn't really lie, but Mercury is what would be considered like a liar, deceitful. Neptune does have that as well, but it's a little bit on a different level. Mercury is the thing where like we have our mind, and we have this ability to process the information and say, okay, I know saying this will hurt this person's feelings, and I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say this instead. So the moon and Gemini are really good at that, and I think if they're using it for a means of emotional connection overall, that's what's going to really, really help them, versus using it for a means of emotional disconnection and keeping someone at bay. There's a very different approach that Moon Gemini can have, and they can really do a lot with it. Gemini energy, it's very fun doing this series in like a whole week, because there is so much Gemini energy that I work through and kind of experience during this week in specific, because there's a lot of different ways that Gemini can be approached. And the moon in Gemini has a very emotional reason as to why they're saying what they're saying. And so I think it's really important for moon in Gemini to know specifically how they're communicating their feelings, and how Another thing that I think is really important with most Gemini placements, but the moon here is definitely one of them, is knowing how to specifically communicate and understand your relationship with specific words and also other people's relationship with those words. So think about how like everyone has a different experience with their family, or everyone has a different experience with, money or their career, right? Or their health or their body or their self-image, all these different things, right? And the Moon and Gemini individual, they're going to be able to kind of gather a bunch of information and be able to get a bunch of context. But what I think is really important for all Gemini placements, but the Moon and Gemini has a little bit more of a gift with this once they learn how to do this, is to understand the relationship someone else has with those specific power words or those specific things. Be like, okay, what does that mean for you? Like a lot of clarifying questions are really good for a Moon and Gemini person to do, but also if you know a Moon and Gemini person, for you to do that for them, like to clarify and say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? The thing about Moon Gemini, and Gemini placements, they can get kind of agitated if people aren't keeping up with them. I see that a little bit more with obviously like a Mars Gemini placement, or if a Moon in Gemini is aspected to Mars or aspected to, even Jupiter sometimes can have that quality, like a Moon Jupiter in Gemini aspect can kind of have that quality of almost like you're not keeping up kind of thing. So it's important for the Moon Gemini individual to know specifically how to communicate about their feelings. Know that there's value in that. There's so much of a gift that you guys have in your ability to communicate what you're feeling and talk about what you're feeling in so many various ways. And so it is also important to see, because it's a Gemini placement, to see what Mercury's doing in the chart, because all Gemini placements are ruled by Mercury, except, well, I'm not gonna say except Mercury, because Mercury's, anywho, Gemini brain fart moment right now, okay? Y'all have such an interesting energy to be in. I don't have your Gemini placement, so it's very different for me to do these videos. But what I was saying is every single Gemini placement is ruled by Mercury, meaning that if your moon's in Gemini, you're gonna wanna see what Mercury is doing in your chart. If Mercury is retrograde, which it is for about 3 times a year, you're going to really have a different experience with communicating your feelings and just communication in general. Mercury retrogrades are something that so many people talk about, but the thing about Mercury retrogrades that they don't talk about is think of it as just simply a filter. It's something that it's not necessarily the bare minimum is getting through, but you're only really, what's resonating is kind of what is really supposed to. And you aren't really necessarily meant to communicate or understand everything. And that can be extremely frustrating, especially if you have Gemini placements and you have a retrograde Mercury. It can definitely feel like a very difficult sort of conversational quality that you're like, I can't grasp this, I can't get this, right? In the same vein, having Mercury really close to the moon or to the sun is going to obviously change this, and looking at Mercury's aspects as well as the moon aspects are going to help you give further context for that. So knowing specifically, if the moon is in a difficult aspect to your Mercury placement, right? So let's say the moon's in Gemini and then, Mercury is opposite it maybe in Sagittarius. It's gonna be a very different quality, or maybe it's Mercury is, maybe even in a supportive aspect in, Libra, or Mercury's in Aquarius. There can be so many different things that Mercury is kind of helping support. And so overall, it's really important to look at obviously the moon in Gemini is very important, but looking at the whole totality of the chart, which I know can be extremely, extremely intimidating. But there's a lot of different layers to the moon and how its aspects are kind of going on. And if you are a Gen Z and you have your moon in Gemini, you are going to have your Pluto in Sagittarius. So there's going to be some interesting emotional gaslighty conversations, power dynamics between the mother. That's another thing too. The moon does rule the mother. So when the moon's in Gemini, there could be this almost childlike quality and a lot of learning ability from the mother, a lot of communication with the mother. And that's a big lesson around Moon Gemini, is how to communicate with the mother, and in turn, how to communicate your feelings, how to speak about things, how to feel safe to communicate whatever it is that you are experiencing. So that's definitely a part of this story with the Moon and Gemini, to look at the mother too. And also, Gemini also, it rules this, people don't talk about this that much. The reason why it rules siblings is because siblings are the only people that have lived the same life, air quote, right? Not necessarily the exact same life, but have had a majority of the same experiences as you. And because of that, Gemini placements, they rule this aspect of when you are conversing with someone that you, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's, they also rule neighbors, neighbors, siblings, anyone that you kind of grew up around, being able to communicate with them and share your opinion of, oh no, it didn't go this way, it went this way for me, this is how I interpreted it, or I interpreted it this way, right? There's a lot of that kind of like different perspective that rules this Gemini third house kind of area. And the moon here really has an emotional connection to that ability to understand its story. And Moon Gemini, you guys also are amazing speakers too. You have a lot of emotional quality when you are speaking. So being able to do, you know, not necessarily public speaking, but do some sort of expression of your voice that is, you know, emotional. You can see a lot of people with Gemini placements be, you know, slam poets or just poets in general, or rappers. Anyone that uses their vocal ability and their mental acuity to convey an emotional message is really big on the Moon Gemini. And so I think it's really important too to look at where your moon is placed in your chart. And you Moon Gemini people, you are so information heavy, so I get it. And there's a lot of stuff that you guys have to learn and grow from. And it's kind of like this, both Gemini and Leo and Aries can have this kind of like, this childlike demeanor to them. But the thing about Moon Gemini I really like is there's a curiosity to them. And so if you consistently stay curious as a Moon Gemini individual, you will explore a lot of options, and you will learn so much more about yourself, and you will have so much of a gift with that. And you can find a lot of really good conversations are had when you lean in with curiosity with what someone else is experiencing and feeling, which is once again why Moon Geminis can make amazing therapists, amazing friends too, and just amazing people, because they have this very fun way of dealing with feelings. It can be a little light, right? All the moon air signs have this little like light quality to them where they're not necessarily super in their feelings and they're kind of in their head, and so they can have really good comedy to them. You can see a lot of people that are kind of expressing their feelings up here, and processing them, and that's how they deal with them, right? That's kind of, as another moon air person, that's how I've kind of figured it out, is I'm just kind of like, okay, I stay up here, I analyze them, and I talk about them, and I find ways to kind of bounce ideas off. And it's a very moon air thing, is finding ways to get the feeling out and talk about it. You guys have such a gift there, and I really would urge you to look into that. So that's it for the Moon Gemini portion. If you guys are interested in any of my other videos, anything like that, obviously YouTube has all of those stuff down there. And then if you guys are interested in any of my astrology readings, astrology courses, things like that, my website's down below as well. Feel free to check any of that out for you. But I will go on to the next part and talk about the moon in the third house. Okay, so we have the moon in the third house here. This is a very sensitive area for the chart to be in. The moon actually does quite well here. It does quite well in this house. Because many, I'm not going to bore all of you with all the information, but essentially there's certain houses that certain planets do well in, and the moon in the third house does quite well. So there is a lot of lessons around learning how to communicate. And I think the reason why that is, the moon does so well in the third house, is because there's this kind of like sustainment of information from emotional imprints. Like the emotional imprint and information is a little bit deeper when the moon's in the third house, and also moon in Gemini similarly, but the moon in the third can have this kind of like really, it's more enriched by all of the new knowledge, so it has this very thirst for knowledge kind of vibe to it, but it's very sensitive, right? And the thing is with the third house, it's a very changeable area in the chart. It rules a lot about how you process the world, how you find ways to communicate your story. And the moon here makes that very sensitive. It does make your relationship with your siblings very interesting. Your relationship with your community, very interesting as well. Your community involvement, your advocacy work. Advocacy work can be a little bit more Aquarius, but still, like, there's a lot of knowing your community, knowing the way around, right? And so Moon Gemini and Moon third house, they have this kind of this community communication gift, where they kind of know, okay, if I go down this corner, I'm going to run into this and this and this. Their spatial awareness is very, very, very unique. But also, it's really important to see where, like, what moon sign is placed in the third house, because that's going to show a little bit more of specifically how this person is meant to communicate and how they are meant to truly kind of express their opinions, because the third house is really our opinions. It's kind of all these little skill sets. It's our certifications. It's how we go to school. It's how we get all these little plaques and stuff that we kind of collect that help us, right? These things that help us sell ourselves. The third house does rule sales, and with the moon being in the third house, with it ruling the public and merchants and yada yada yada, and there's all those things that the third house really can support the moon with. And so there's a lot of really supportive writing, a lot of family writing too. Family opinions are really important with the moon in the third house. But overall, you're going to see that there's going to be this very consistent up and down with how much you feel like you can understand, how much you feel you can process throughout a day. Because the third house is this very young and explorative house. It rules that time in our lives where we're, just kids, and we're just figuring stuff out, and we're having fun, and we're, exploring the information around us, and we're kind of getting a little bit of a framework of how the world works. And so the moon here can have days that are really, really great, where they're like, I want to go and do all this stuff. I want to try all these things. Their nervous system is very, very active. Both moon and Gemini and moon third house, there's a very active nervous system. And it's a lot about knowing how to regulate that nervous system, and maybe, like, if moon's in Capricorn in the third, there could be this quality of, I can't handle this much in my day-to-day, or I'm doing too much. I can't emotionally handle this many conversations. There, you can see that there. But there's an overall quality with moon in the third that comes around to specifically knowing how to communicate your story in a way that emotionally connects to whomever you're talking to. And your story can be literally your experience, like understanding the value of your experience. And also too, we'll see this way more when we go to the fourth house and Cancer placements, but the third house does have this quality of speaking about family secrets. The reasoning for that, it's 12th to the fourth house. So it's going to be about family secrets and really understanding the family lineage, because the moon does rule that family lineage and that sensitivity. So there can be this quality of like family communication gift, or family talk, like you're the one that talks about all the things that don't need to be talked about or shouldn't be talked about, or no one wants to talk about, right? That can be a quality of the moon in the third. Moon Gemini do that too, but they just do that in general. But the third house has a little bit more of a specific to the family secrets, and also has a lot to do with learning how to communicate about your experience that was relative to family, because the moon does rule that, and being able to find the right ways to explain those things and kind of be that kind of karmic breaker, if you will, of the family and the way they perceive things that are wrong, and explain to them how they're wrong, explain to them the other perspective. And so when you see if you see the moon in the third house too, the mother's opinions are really, really a big part of it, the family's opinions. And that's why if you see, if we have like the moon in Pisces in the third house, there's going to be like a, this almost like either a very spiritual part of, the opinions from the mother and the family that are being brought to you, these beliefs about how you understand the world. There could be a lot of indoctrination, a lot of things like that, but there can also be a lot of enabling, a lot of toxicity, a lot of things that have to be purged with Pisces in the third house with the moon there, because you can see that there's like things that have to be fully felt with a Pisces moon in the third, and almost the toxic mental kind of chains that you can see, and that I see more with the moon Scorpio in the third, and that's a whole different conversation. It's a little bit more deeper there, but there's a quality of the mother's opinions, and those opinions being rooted in how you perceive the world, and the family's opinions being rooted in how you perceive the world. So it's important to know what your moon sign is in that house, so you can kind of unbox a little bit more about how specifically you are working with you know, your opinions and how your family's opinions, especially if it's because it's the moon, it's going to be family opinions, and how that conditioning is something you are perpetuating or needing to reestablish or stabilize or change, you know, or start something anew, right? There's so many different ways that the moon in that third house can play a role, and all of it centers around your ability to utilize the information that you got from your childhood, your upbringing, and also all the information you've gained, and be able to find a better conversation about it, better way to speak on it, a better way to converse and to shed light on different aspects of it, and have different things that are brought up that have this kind of like different perspective to them, right? And the moon in the third, there's definitely going to be some very emotional conversations around feeling understood or misunderstood, or communicating too much or not understanding enough. There can definitely be something with that. And also, of course, look to whatever is ruling that third house and whatever is ruling that moon sign, right? And that's where this can get a little bit more layered, right? You're going to want to look to see, like, if moon's in Aries in the third house, you're going to want to look to see what Mars is doing, right? And that Mars can be doing really well, and then it can kind of link to other parts of the chart. So you're going to see that as you kind of go through this. This is really just like, kind of like a beginner's series of all these different things. But there is so much more that you can learn when it comes to astrology. Shameless plug in my course down there. Obviously, you know it's there. So feel free to check that out. But at the end of the day, there is this moon third house quality. It's so fun because I don't spend this much time aggressively sitting in the third house and aggressively sitting in, you know, this sort of like Gemini energy. It's very different for me, and it's very fun to do stuff like this, which is also another quality of Gemini. It's very fun and jovial. It's very enjoyable. It's very explorative. And the third house does also, once again, it rules that that schooling process, that how you sell yourself, how you you know, find ways to communicate yourself, and how you do communicate. The moon in that third house does have that kind of connecting quality to it when it comes to community and community conversations. And so that third house moon can definitely have this learning something from the family, like family teaching, family childhood teachers. This is another thing too. You could be great childhood teachers with the moon. Like if the moon was in Leo in the third house, I would be like, you need to teach children. You need to, you know, be someone that's lending to the conversation of youth and caretaking. Because the moon in the third, it's going to have more of a, your opinions are going to mean a lot more to you when you share them. They're going to be a lot more emotionally charged, and how you communicate and what you sell yourself to be, meaning like how you, not necessarily how you brand yourself, but what you're communicating to those around you, and how that's emotionally impacting you and them. So there's a lot of emotional sensitivity around your own words and your own kind of perspectives and what you share with the world. There's a lot of power there. And the moon Gemini has a very unique gift, and the moon third house also is a very unique gift. Both of those houses are all about kind of exploring in the library, in books, in your basement, in all of these different spaces that are so rich with information, and finding the puzzle pieces, right? It almost makes it so fun to have a moon in Gemini. That's why it's such a lighthearted thing. Both my parents are moon in Gemini, so there's a lot of emotional conversations and a lot of talking and kind of staying up here with stuff, and I think it's really fun to see how the moon Gemini interacts. There's a lot of there's a lot of gossip too. Moon third house, moon Gemini. I see it more with moon Gemini than moon third house, but gossip is definitely a Gemini thing, and the ability to understand how, you know, what's around you, right? And the moon third house has that a little bit differently depending upon the sign and aspects and things, obviously. But the moon in the third house, it's more about specifically like experiencing that. Like, what was your experience with the gossip and this person down the street and this, you know, whatever it was, right? There's a lot of those sorts of conversations. And you can see also third house rules driving. So there could be a very, you can see if moon was in Aries in the third house, there could be, or moon was in Scorpio, or moon was aspecting Mars and moon was in the third house. This could be someone who's like a very angry driver, a very reactive driver. And so a lot of this with moon third house and Gemini placements in general, there's a lot of sensitivity to information, to all the information, because they're trying to understand and constantly filter out the information that's around them to see what is valuable, what is not. And the moon third house can have this, it's almost It's also true when we get to third house placements. It's funny because I'm not going to be doing anything with like Neptune or Pluto in the third or anything like that. But when you have like the moon in the third house, these are types of people that could like really, especially with like moon in Pisces in the third house, moon in Aquarius, different things. They could go on a drive to feel and escape their feelings or feel their feelings or express their feelings or whatever it may be, to just feel free. You can see that a lot with third house placements, and the moon there is probably the most prominent one that I would suspect that does that. That just kind of goes and just explores and allows themselves to just feel their feelings, right? Whether it's like I need to go out, I need to drive, I need to be angry, I need to just scream in my car at my loud music, or if I need to just escape for a little bit and just go and drive and have no direction and just let it guide me and just trust that I know how I'm going to get home, right? There's stuff like that you can see with the moon third house. There's a lot of emotional connections to driving and transportation too. And there, like if we saw like a moon in the third house that was more of a, like I said, like I'm trying to find all of them. Like a Virgo moon in the third house. This is actually pretty nice. This would be someone that I think would be really good at, this is screaming librarian energy, but it's also screaming like medical analysis, being able to really, this would be someone who I would think is very, very, very intelligent with the moon in Virgo in the third house. But they can have this almost like, with the driving portion for these people, they could almost be too meticulous with their time and kind of try and control it too much and not really necessarily enjoy it. Whereas moon in Pisces can just be like, I'm just going to go drive and just listen to music and just space out. There's a lot of different things that can happen with this moon sign. Yeah, and with, if we have like moon in Aquarius in the third, this is going to be someone who has a really different opinion than other people. It's going to be more on that side of stuff. When you see Aquarius, very different way of approaching things, kind of unique just perspective in a lot of ways. Yeah, there's so many different things. Moon in Taurus in the third, I really like. This is someone who would be a really great, like, once again, a really similar to moon Gemini, but moon third house Taurus could be someone who's like a really great emotional support, and makes money through their communication too. When you see the moon in the third house in Taurus, you can see that someone whose value is made through their own communication. Similarly with moon in Libra in the third, but this is going to have a little bit more of a relationship quality and kind of a ability to create peace. So that could be more, that I would see more specifically with like the staple like relationship therapist or therapist. Moon in Taurus in the third would be more of like a writer who publishes a lot of books or who is able to capitalize and value their information and put it out there. There's so many different things. There's so many different approaches. And that's the thing I think is so fun. It's like when you come to astrology and you realize that there's so many different like combinations that you can look at, it's really layered, right? And this is just the moon sign placement in the third house. This isn't even like everything with the aspects and everything like that. So it can get quite complex. But the thing with the moon third house, it does ultimately want you to learn how to communicate your opinion, how to share your opinion, how to share your voice, how to find your voice, and also how to, especially if it's like Saturnian in nature or there's Saturn aspects to that moon in the third house, there's almost this like needing to solidify your responsibility of your opinion, your responsibility of your voice, your responsibility of what you're sharing, and being able to really make sure that you are responsible and you are utilizing the information in a way that is stable and strong and long, right? And so we'll see this more when we talk about Saturn in the third house and Saturn in Gemini. That's a whole different story. But the moon here definitely has more of a sensitive quality to its words. So because of that, it's important for you to know your opinion is valuable, your voice is valuable, your information is valuable, what you've been through is valuable, and your ability to put the words to what you went through and communicate that and find people to talk about that with is so valuable and needs to be shared. And also there's so much more information out there that you can utilize to kind of further understand your specific family secrets, family heritage, all those sorts of things. And so look to your family, look to what your family's taught you, your family's, opinions, those sorts of like programming. That's the thing with the third house in Gemini. It's a lot about programming and your way of thinking. And so having an afflicted third house or an afflicted or difficultly, aspected Gemini placement can definitely have this kind of like mental overwhelm or mental stress. And it's about being able to really process the information and working through a lot of information, right? But being able to say, this is what is most relevant. And that's why, like, when it comes to, like, when I talk about Moon Virgo in the third, that's like someone who's like able to really pinpoint that. Or Moon Cancer can help that too, Moon Taurus. A lot of those well-placed moon signs are going to do pretty well there. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, this is such a fun series. I love this. I really do. I love being able to do this. And it is such a different way of doing astrology content. At least for me, like, just a whole week of the whole thing. Like, it's so fun for me to experience all this Gemini stuff that I'm a little bit foreign to. Because it's so inquisitive and it's so fun and it's so knowledgeable, and I love being able to experience so much of it in such a condensed amount of time. And I really appreciate all of you that sit through these and watch these and enjoy them. Obviously, if you like my videos, obviously like, subscribe, the YouTube stuff, that stuff. And feel free to put it down there if you guys have Moon Gemini, Moon in the third house. I would love to hear specifically what that experience has been like for you. I would absolutely adore it, because you guys have so much information to share, especially third house people, Moon people. You guys have so much information to share. The Moon in the third, I get things a little bit different. It's a little bit more on the emotionally reserved side or emotionally reactive side to the information. But the Moon in the third house and third house people are going to have hopefully more of a information sharing type of quality to them, because Gemini and third house are very information heavy. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you utilize this information as best as you can. I hope this was able to give you some information. Obviously, I'm sure you probably watch this on 2x speed, because at the end of the day, y'all are third house and Gemini people, so information is like so much right now. Yeah, and I just appreciate you. I appreciate you so much for being here. Obviously, like and subscribe, and if you have any information and you want to check out my courses, my website, anything like that, all that's down below. And feel free to check out the playlist down below. That's going to have all of the information about all of the series that I'm doing. So once again, I've already done all of Aries and all of Taurus, and this is Gemini, and then you will see them progressively kind of come out. So thank you so much for once again being here. I appreciate you so much. I hope you have an amazing day, you Moon Gemini, Moon third house people, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.